Since before recorded history, the people of Britain have had first-hand experience of the strange and unusual. Spirits who haunt ancient castles, stories of werewolves and banshees roaming the countryside, and fantastic creatures like gnomes, fairies and pixies, all firmly embedded in our native folklore. This cultural experience makes us uniquely qualified to research these types of phenomena and help us find the truth of the reality that surrounds us. So sit back and relax as your hosts, Irene Allen Block and Mark Johnson, take you on a journey through this strange realm and together help us find the answers to the mysteries that lie just beyond our grasp. Welcome to Paranormal UK Radio.
Welcome to the Paranormal UK Radio Show, the flagship show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm your host, Irene Allen Block, and here tonight with me are my co-hosts, Mark Johnson, and my other co-host, Andy Mercer. Hello, boys.
Hello.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, boy, have I missed you two. I really have missed you.
We've missed you too. Welcome back.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Andy, I really do want to say thank you very much for stepping in my shoes and becoming Irene Allen Block for all these weeks.
Well, I did my best at an impression, but it didn't sound very convincing, and your shoes are a bit too tight. But otherwise, it's nice.
You don't know the size of my feet.
Yeah,
my feet.
I haven't sent over the pictures of him wearing your outfits either, so.
Well, unfortunately, I had to bail out myself last week. I had a hell of a cold. It was just the start of a real stinker, which colds don't usually bother me too much. But with my professional work as a therapist, of course, I do need to keep my voice. And as Mark will tell you, probably did tell you, I sounded bloody terrible. So
he came on just before the show, and I listened to him. He's like, "Yeah, Mark, I'm here." It's like, no, you're not. Take the night off. Go relax. I can handle it.
Yeah.
And, we had a good show with Alton Chad Dillard, and they make it easy, especially if you're a single host, because they've got a lot to talk about. So it was the 2 hours went by pretty quickly. So you get some rest, and we're just glad that you're able to join us this week.
Yes, I'm alive and reasonably well. Although, I apologise if I disappear off for a moment. I find this cough is just lingering, which is rather irritating. But otherwise, I'm fairly fit and healthy again, as fit and healthy as I've ever am, which is not all that fit or healthy. But I am alive, at least. That's the main thing. But yeah, it's been good fun the last few weeks. I've quite enjoyed stepping into your shoes, Irene. We've had some fascinating guests. And this highlight for me must have been Eric. I really enjoyed that conversation with Eric Werner. That was really good. So,
but also, lovely.
Yeah, he's a great bloke, actually. I must admit, as we talked about, I wasn't too sure what to make or what to expect. But no, he was a really nice guy, and I really enjoyed that one. Also, I found John Edwards very interesting as well with his experience of his ranch.
Another lovely fellow.
Yeah, and I heard about the ranch, but knew very little. I mean, there's another ranch that's quite famous, of course, for similar kind of strange experiences, but I hadn't heard much about John's, and that was really fascinating as well. I enjoyed that too.
Well, definitely. They just announced this last week. The ranch is officially up for sale. It's on the market for $5 million, which, it's a large property. There's a lot of acreage there and horse property, so it's not an outrageous price. And, if we could, if we could raise a little bit of money, maybe we can do a GoFundMe, raise $5 million. We could buy it for ourselves. Then we'd have our own place to research every single day.
Good Lord.
I think that's about all I've got left in the bank, Mark.
Just $5 million, really? Wow.
Oh dear.
God, you're practically out on the streets.
God, it's that high life she lives out there. Oh, that's terrible.
Tell Brian to get out and work harder.
Could you imagine that, though, actually having a property like that ourselves to actually spend 24/7 investigating? That would be quite incredible, actually.
Well, actually, all you have to do is ask Robert Bigelow, the head of Bigelow Aerospace, because he owns the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. He bought it.
Nobody can get near that, can they?
No, that's what he did. He bought it and then closed it off, and he had his own little scientific team in there, the National Institute for Discovery Science. They've been in there for over 20 years now, and of course he keeps everything quiet, armed guards, never releases what's going on there. I'm not a big fan of Bigelow, and he's even come out in the news in the last couple weeks He's stating that, oh yeah, there are aliens here. They are visiting us, and the news is starting to take him a little bit seriously. But you know what? Ever since I saw Jesse Ventura's episode on conspiracy theory on him, and how his contracts with the U.S. government, he's the only civilian in not only the United States and the world that has a treaty with the United States that allows him to have weapons in space. Tell me, you know what? We have treaties with other countries to not put weapons in space, and yet they've got something allowing this guy to. And he's so secretive, and he's. I don't trust him. I don't trust him at all. Now he's coming out, and people, oh well, he's a well-respected guy. Nah, he's hiding stuff. He's really hiding stuff. Sounds very suspicious. So it's all. At least if we bought the ranch, then we could do our research and bring in other teams and let other people, and that would be cool. The only problem is they have such an alien problem. Is like, who'd be willing to spend the night there?
That would be difficult. Yes, I'd be there definitely with samurai sword and everything. I'm absolutely ready for that.
I'd set up some traps,
Samurai sword.
Yeah, no, but he's had that kind of problem. Waking up in the night, he's found that's the best defense is a bit of attack, keeps things away from him, because it's obviously been quite a difficult experience for him, certainly.
Yeah, he claims to have killed several of them. And with a sword, and his wife is constantly harassed. He's been harassed. So, I think what we do is like redo the house in the fashion of the movie Home Alone, with all these booby traps and everything to catch the little bastards as they're coming through the walls.
I mean, obviously we're kind of joking about this, but there are a few locations over here where people have specifically bought them and then are letting them out virtually every night of the week for investigations, and companies are coming in to do sort of public investigations and paying a few pounds to do that. So you can actually turn these odd locations into businesses if you're that way inclined. It is possible.
You know what? I normally have an issue, some issue. I mean, it's a double-edged sword. A lot of these haunted locations that they rent out for people to come in and do investigations. And, of course, it's good for the historical locations because they're getting a source of revenue they normally wouldn't have to keep the place up. The only problem I have is you've got so many inexperienced investigators going into these places, stirring things up, and in some cases maybe even bringing more stuff in. So that's always kind of scary, and how fair is it, let's say if you have let's say it's a haunted location, to keep those spirits around? I know people who want to keep the spirits there because it's making them money. And on a moral and ethical side, should you help them cross over? You're exploiting them. Where a place like the ranch, the Stardust Ranch in Arizona, it's not a haunted thing. It's a high strangeness event. You're dealing with possible aliens or possible multidimensional beings, a portal, all this other activity coming around. It's not like you're exploiting a poor ghost who should be moving on and doesn't know how to.
Or spirit.
You've got
at the moment, it feels like I've got an alien right behind me now. I apologize. Gertie's back. She's back on the air. She's snoring away. I keep poking her, but it doesn't wake her up.
Sounds like the dog man. Yeah, that's what we should do. You should record Gertie snoring, and then we pass it around the internet claiming it's dog man activity. See, absolutely. You can hear the dog man in the woods.
Can you hear her?
Now she quiets down.
Yeah. I heard her earlier, actually. I did hear her earlier on, but not now, no.
Oh, well, Paranormal UK Radio is never the same without Gertie.
Gertie, our official mascot.
That's right.
Definitely.
Puppy of the Paranormal.
Puppy of the Paranormal. I like that.
It's got to be one of the most unusual logos for any paranormal radio station I've ever seen, actually.
A British bulldog with pink sunglasses on.
Well, basically, they have ghost images and sort of monsters and scary stuff. We have a rather nice little dog.
Well, with Halloween coming up, maybe I should make her into a vampire, give her some fangs or something, and a little cowl, cape. Make her a vampire for Halloween.
Oh no, I'll just get her an outfit and take a photograph. She'll wear anything. Look, she wore those sunglasses for 2.5 hours.
Oh, there she goes.
So I'll just make her into a little witch.
Little snore bag.
Oh, sorry. I am so sorry. She's so embarrassing.
It's a lot of fun. We've missed Gertie on the show.
Oh, yeah.
Snoring away in the background.
Well, as she gets bigger and she gets older, obviously she's going to get louder. At the moment, she's still a pup, so,
But, it's not a true British show without a British bulldog.
No, of course it's not. No.
Absolutely.
So.
It's bad enough you have this American Yank slumming around over here and bringing down the quality. We need Gertie to help bring it up.
That one. We can manage you.
Oh, okay. I'm glad somebody can. Nobody else seems to be able to. So in any case, we have Halloween around the corner.
Yes.
So, do you guys have any big plans for Halloween?
No, we don't really do a lot over here, do we, Andy?
Absolutely nothing whatsoever. In fact, quite worse for me. I, as you know, work as a therapist. I work sort of most evenings, and on Halloween I have to cancel my evening clients because there's a lot of young children around here, and they do come knocking on the door and actually tap on my office window sometimes. So on the night of Halloween, it's quite the reverse. I do absolutely nothing. I don't work or anything. I just sit quietly and ignore the front door. So don't do a thing.
And many of the children nowadays that come banging on the door, they don't want the sweets. They want money.
Yes.
That's the shame of it all.
I would tell them, the little bastards, you want money? Get out there and mow that lawn. Then I'll give you some money.
But if whether you give them sweets or whether you give them money or not, but if you don't give them anything, you end up with eggs thrown at your windows and your front door. Sometimes your head.
See, over here, I'm in Colorado.
It's not really celebrated over here all that much. Not like out there.
Well, it has become in recent years, and it's because of
money-making thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's to do with some other country who makes a big thing of it, and it sort of sneaked over from that place. They seem to have brought it over. Yes.
Well, you know what? The one thing about us Americans, we're always looking for an excuse to party. So, Halloween is so much fun to dress up and party and get drunk and be an idiot. And so we're always looking for an excuse. But, I was going to say over here, I live in Colorado, so there's a little something that's legal here. So, if you get some certain brats coming over you don't like, give them some certain sweets like, brownies or certain gummies.
You should not say that. Honest.
Terrible.
Yes, I know. It's terrible.
Terrible, isn't it?
No, I would never do. I'm joking,
Just
people.
Give them a plant to take home to their mummies.
In the old days, you used to break out the shotgun with rock salt. Can't do that now. They take all the fun away from Halloween.
Yeah. Well, I suppose they do, really. So what else is going on? Let's see. Now, I'm not going to be around in 2 weeks' time because it's my mother's funeral.
And we were very sorry to hear about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not good at all. But I'm trying to hold it together, so we'll see. But on that particular week as well, we've got someone fantastic coming on. We've got Billy Roberts. Billy Roberts, the medium. He's been on television and radio. He's been in quite a few shows over this country. That week he's on. And unless I can shift him about a little bit, I'm going to miss him. And I really don't want to miss him because I want to talk to him.
Unless we can bring him on the next day, depending on when you think you'll be home.
Yeah, we'll see.
Because we do pre-record, so there is a little bit of flexibility there. But don't forget the week before, which is next week, we're having our big Halloween show. And we're having all of the Paranormal UK family joining us, all of our British hosts, and we're going to be popping off for a pint down at the Cock and Balls pub, the haunted pub. Cock and Balls
Ye
pub.
Old Cock and Balls.
Yes. And we'll be telling...
that's one to remember. Ye Old Cock and Balls.
And we'll be sharing ghost stories, true paranormal encounters, and having some pints and some crisps while we're at it. So it should be a lot of fun.
Pork scratchings.
Oh, blimey. That's
Oh.
a disease.
Yeah, but you're going to have pork scratchings, haven't you?
And we do also want to mention that, Andy, you've got your new show that's also going to be coming up in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's great. Come on, Andy.
It's taken some time to put it all together. It's gone through various name changes and ideas behind it, but now it's finally coming together. It's going to be now, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but I think it's the second Thursday of the month.
Yes.
Back in my old slot that the Transatlantic used to be in. The only real reason why Transatlantic kind of closed down was more to do with the fact that a lot of the time it was kind of doing the same topics as the other shows had done, and then we started to move it more into kind of an esoteric, there's a witchcraft magic type stuff. And I thought, well, let's turn the show into a show that's dedicated to that kind of material. I thought it's not something you've got on the network at the moment, and it's more my real area of sort of knowledge and experience, so it made more sense. So it became and has become Radio Esoterica. I've got a few guests already lined up. I've got a friend of mine talking about a chap called Kenneth Grant and Typhonian magic, which is interesting. Another chap who's actually lives in New York, but he's English, he's going to be talking about the esoteric side of Freemasonry. I've also managed to snag an interview with someone I think is going to be quite fascinating. I don't want to say too much at the moment because I don't want anyone else to steal him, but he wrote a thing that appeared on the BBC a good few years ago that's become very controversial. It's all to do with the paranormal, but I managed to grab the author of the piece and to talk to him about the programme and his other work. He's done other films as well, but that's going to be something coming on next year. My first show next month is going to be the first part of our witchcraft conference that I was involved in back in September. All 5 speakers have agreed to allow me to use excerpts from their talks as I recorded the whole thing. Unfortunately, one of them didn't come out, so the recording failed, which is a real shame. It was a very good talker. But the first show next month has got the first 2 speakers and extracts from their talk, so it's all live recorded from there. They're kind of extracts, as I say, not the complete talks. You have to be there to get the complete talks. And then the following month is part 2, and part 2 involves myself and Gemma Gary giving their talk. So that's sort of this year's part of the show. The next year, as I say, will be starting with, I'm not sure which yet. I've done a couple of recordings already, so it's a question of which one I'm going to put out first, or at least they're planned to be done fairly soon. So, but yes, Radio Hermetica is going to be dedicated more to the witchcraft, magic, the occult, esoteric, all those kind of topics. So I'm looking forward to it. It should be good fun.
And this can all be heard on the Paranormal UK Radio Network and Dark Matter Digital.
Indeed.
Yes.
We've worked out
all our shows now. All our original shows now are also broadcast on the Dark Matter Digital Radio Network.
Yep, we worked out a deal with them to rebroadcast some of our original programming, all of our British show hosts, and so help giving people some more exposure. So you hear the shows originally here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and then the following Tuesday night they will also rebroadcast on the Dark Matter Digital Network. So we want to give a big shout out to Dark Matter.
To our friends at Dark Matter Digital Network.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
So I'll tell you what, as a sort of relative newcomer to the American style of working, some of my shows I've been involved in before are mainly in the UK. Tell me more about the Dark Matter Network. Well, who is it? Who's behind it? And where did it come about? And who's involved?
Well, Dark Matter Digital Network was formed by, well, it's not, Art Bell doesn't own it, but Art Bell, who was famously from Coast to Coast AM for a number of years, he pretty much put paranormal radio on the map. And yes. with that, he left them for a while. Then he came out briefly with his own show on Sirius XM, which was called Dark Matter, but that ended quickly. So he had his webmaster form and put together the Dark Matter Digital Network as a showcase for his new show, Midnight in the Desert, which is 5 nights a week there. And Art had some personal issues come up, so now it's hosted by Heather Wade. And we have been broadcasting Paranormal UK radio on there since its inception. Actually, before that, we were doing our old show, Unknown Origins Radio. We were on there for a number of years, and then when we retired that show and came up with Paranormal UK, we just slid it right in. And then
that's right. We've been with them for quite some time, haven't we?
We've had a wonderful working relationship with them. Technically, they're competition, but they're not, because we really cater a lot to the British, the family, the British audience, the European audiences, and but we still have a great working relationship with them. So it just goes to show you that people can cooperate out there together.
Yes, absolutely. It's a mutual interest thing, helps each other out. As I say, from the sounds, this is a big popular network, so it's good to be sort of linking up with people. We're all working together as much as is possible. I mean, obviously, okay, sometimes show times are going to clash a bit, but otherwise, it's good to work with these people. So that's great, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's not where we're stopping. We're going further. That's another day. That's for another day.
Okay.
There's a lot of more things, a lot of more fires or irons in the fire.
With Irene around, she doesn't let any grass grow under her feet. There's always something new on the horizon.
Indeed.
Well, before we get into our topic tonight, I just want to mention one more thing, and I want to talk especially with you, Andy, about it because of your background and with the new show, and you're looking more in the occult and witches, and this just popped in my head for Halloween. There's so many movies that people like horror movies at Halloween, and personally, I don't think there's been a really good horror movie made in about 20 years. Or longer. I'm not a fan of modern horror, so-called horror movies. But every now and then something comes out, and I wanted to ask you, have you ever seen this? It was this little-known movie, came out a year or two ago, called The Witch.
Well, funny enough, I've heard a lot about it, and I've never actually seen it, to be perfectly honest with you. It looks like one of those sort of relatively low-budget things, but apparently from what I've read and heard, it's supposed to be really good and well made and put together. But I must confess, I haven't seen it.
Well, what I'm going to do is I want to recommend it to you to go watch it, because I would like to get your opinion on it. Because with this movie, and again, it didn't hit wide. It's kind of become a, pardon the pun, a cult type of movie. But it's not like modern horror at all. In fact, it's set in the 1600s. In New England, and it deals, while it does not deal directly with the Salem witch trials, it deals with that mentality of a small religious family. Most of the groups over in that time period who came over, there was a lot of the religious groups that came over for religious freedom, and they, it's like what happened in Salem with that kind of hysteria is similar to what happens in this movie, where a small family, they disagree with what's going on in their village, so they move out on their own and they're on their property, and things start happening to them. And it's not like a horror movie at all. It's like you're watching an historical drama. But what really gets me is they went to painstaking details to get everything right, to get the period right, even the language, the people, the actors are speaking. It's very archaic. It's almost 400 years old, and how it gets into the mindset of what starts happening. It's very psychological, yet there is a supernatural element to it, but they don't really go overboard. And the occult type of incidents that happen with this movie, and again, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil it for you. Let's just put it this way. The ending is probably one of the more disturbing endings of a horror movie I've seen. No shocks, no gore, nothing like that. It's the implications of what happens and what the people's beliefs and values of that time period, how that they could affect the results of what's going on. And I'm going to leave it at that. Anybody else has seen the movie will know what I'm talking about. But again, it's not a big action movie. It's not a big thing with scares. It's slow. It builds up. And it's like with the Blair Witch Project, which, you know, which, the witch. You, what's not shown is what's really scary. You know?
It's always the good stuff. As I think we were talking on that show with Eric before, it's films that have that element and the psychological. It's hinted at. It's not in your face. I mean, I like supernatural horrors, even the low budget naff ones have been around recently. But if there's supernatural, I don't go for that sort of the gore fest kind of horrible things of just mad murderers. And I like the things that have got a supernatural element to it. But yeah, definitely do think this Saturday evening. Perhaps I should be having a look at that. I think from the sounds, I say it's not the first time someone suggested I should watch and have a look. I'm not a big fan of historical dramas, to be perfectly honest with you, but I will certainly give it a try. From what you're saying now, Mark, it does sound really interesting.
I personally like movies that are, you know, supernatural movies, and I think I'm tainted these days because of working in the supernatural. Hey, we're investigators. Tends to make you jaded, because I have yet to see a horror movie that can scare me. I went to go see It, and I'm sitting there going, okay, well, this is pretty well made. Yeah. Oh, look, the clown jumped out. Ooh. Okay. You know, oh, the clown.
I don't watch paranormal movies at all. I really don't. I watch action thrillers. A bit of shooting, a bit of killing.
Well, you know,
that's me.
What you need is a good paranormal action thriller, you know, where they're killing and shooting the demons.
Dwell.
Yes, there you go.
Ooh.
Wow, Demons Dwell, the Tower.
I tell you what, that
action.
does look good, actually. That's Stephen King, isn't it?
Yes. And you know what's surprising about that is it is probably one of his most convoluted, worst novels, because he wrote the whole thing on cocaine. He admitted it. He wrote it on the cocaine. It's like 1,100 pages.
Yes.
But what they did for the movie is they actually only took the first half of the book. Because
I'm not sure, people, but I believe it at the moment is going out on Sky TV.
No, it's
this month.
No, that you're probably thinking they made a miniseries back in the 80s, which was god awful. But
no, it's in the film bit, in the movies.
Maybe
there is. So there's a version with Tim Curry. That's the TV version you're talking about there. And so how does it compare to that, Mark? Is it particularly different?
It's serious, where the Tim Curry version was very low budget and cheesy with really horrible acting and dialogue. And you know what? Tim Curry wasn't scary at all. I mean, I always love watching Tim Curry ham it up, but he was not frightening at all. And in this one, the clown is played much more scary, much more, many more things happening around it. But then again, I didn't find any of it scary because I don't find movies scary anymore. I find real life much more horrifying than these supernatural movies. But it's still well made and it's really good. And actually, now the one thing I'm really looking forward to is this weekend on Netflix, the season 2 of Stranger Things is coming out.
Oh, yes, you mentioned that to me before. I must definitely have a look at that. That does sound very much up my street. As we were talking elsewhere, you and I, Mark, have both been fans of the Twin Peaks series, and apparently it's that kind of thing, that kind of I'm not quite sure what's going on, which that looks really good to me, definitely.
Yes. As I mentioned before, it's like watching a fantastic early 80s Steven Spielberg movie. It's almost like a mashup of E.T., The Goonies, and a Stephen King kind of story. And but the
Goonies. Do you remember the Goonies?
Yeah.
Oh yes.
My boys used to sit there, and I had that on video. And every time I wanted them to keep quiet, I put the Goonies on, and they'd sit in front of the television, absolutely glued, waiting for that pirate ship to sail off into the sea.
I'll tell you what, actually, I'd like to recommend a film which is going to sound completely strange. You'll think, what on earth are you talking about? It's a film called Ghost Train. It's from the early 1940s. It stars an actor called Arthur Askey.
Oh, do you remember Arthur Askey? He was a comedian.
He was very funny, actually, from the 1940s, but it's a version of a story written by a chap called Arnold Ridley. Now, there was a TV show in the UK back in the 1970s called Dad's Army, which some of our older English audiences might know. Irene probably does too. And played Private Godfrey, but he wrote a stage play called The Ghost Train. Now, he wrote it, as I say, and then sold the rights fairly soon afterwards. And they reckon if he'd held on to the rights, he'd have been a millionaire, because it's been put on so many times as a theatre production, because it's all set in the station, so you don't need a lot of set. But they made a film of it in the early 1940s, and there's a section in the film, well, I'll give it away, but the station master tells the ghost story of the station, and it's some of the best cinematography work just with lighting that I've ever seen. It really is atmospheric. It's incredibly effective. It's only a section of a few minutes long. The film overall is pretty good. It's quite fun. It's a bit dated, obviously. It's made in the 1940s, but it's quite funny in places. But it's got a real spooky edge to it. But where the guy tells the story of how the ghost train itself came about is really good. Both the lighting, the dialogue, the way the man's telling the story. It's a real proper fireside ghost story. It's really good. They're just that section of the film. It's freely available on YouTube because it was made a long time ago. Yeah. Just put it into a YouTube search. You'll find it on there. And it really is well worth watching. It's the sort of films I like. I love the old black and white ghost stories.
Yeah.
And there's others. There's a chap called Will Hay, who was another comedian from the 1940s, and made a film called Oh, Mr. Porter, which is
I remember that.
Well, that's also loosely based on The Ghost Train. It's basically based on the same play, the same story behind it. He did that one, Ask a Policeman, and The Ghost of St. Michael's. They're all three ghost-related comedies. And the comedy's fantastic. He was brilliant. But they've all got a little edge of spookiness to them. But particularly The Ghost Train, with the old man, the old station master, telling the story of how the Ghost Train came about. It is absolutely brilliant. I say that the lighting is great. The way the guy presents the dialogue itself is really good. So that would be my.
These are the sort of films that you sit and watch on Christmas Eve, isn't it?
Yeah, well, this is a sort of
instead of all these lovely films with, Daughter of Santa are falling in love, all that crap. But these are lovely with the log fire burning and the chestnuts on the fire and whatever, the mulled wine or whatever you've got, and you sit down and you watch something like that, something that's nostalgic.
Absolutely, I love those the old black and white ghost films. But they say it was an old one. I've seen it. I've lost count of them since I watched Ghost Train. I just happened to watch it at the weekend when I was doing other stuff, just on in the background. And I always stop at that point and watch it again. The way the station master tells the story, it really does. It gives you tingles. It's excellent.
Fantastic. Well, I'll have to check that out sometime.
Yeah, I'll have to get those.
As I say, YouTube. They're all on YouTube because they're outside copyright. They're 70, 80 odd years old now. So,
good Lord, watching 80-year-old movies, it's hard to think about sometimes.
I know, it's crazy, but they're well worth it.
Yeah. The older stuff is some of the better stuff. Of course, when I think of classic, I think I miss old classic John Carpenter horror movies. So, like the original Halloween or The Fog.
Oh yes,
love The Fog. So, but
one particular one I actually love, and it's a Prince of Darkness. It's not a vampire.
Prince of Darkness.
I
actually just watched it the other night, and you know what? That movie, it approached some really interesting themes.
Absolutely.
A little religious, but not religious, more on the interdimensional level. And the movie was, and I know John Carpenter wrote it under a pseudonym because he does everything on his movies but doesn't want the credit for it. So he usually gives himself a pseudonym, but he wrote that screenplay. And the concepts that he talked about in there really stand above and beyond what people would, if you take the time to listen to what the people are talking about, rather than just some of the horror that happens with almost like zombies and stuff. Really intelligent and really makes you think.
Yeah, absolutely. That whole idea of the message being beamed back through time and getting to them just through dreams, as you can imagine. For my therapy work, I'm interested in dreams generally, but that whole notion of this is not a dream, this is the year 1099, whatever, and it stops. And it's the imagery that goes with that. Oh, yeah, absolutely. He's had some brilliant ideas, some excellent films, certainly.
Yeah, I miss John Carpenter. I miss his movies. He hasn't really made movies in a while. He's doing a lot now with his music. He's actually touring, performing his movie music live. And
yes, I think I saw an advert about that a while back. Because I mean, as you know, he does all the music in his films as well, and some of that is, I'm quite into electronic music, so it's my kind of thing. Certainly, I mean, I even love Big Trouble in Little China, which just often gets slated. But I really enjoyed that film as well.
It was fun. Well, yeah. Actually, he did direct a new music video based on he just released an album called Anthology, which has he's redone all of his old movie themes from Halloween to Prince of Darkness to Christine, and he took the Christine, which was based on the Stephen King book. He took that theme, but he directed a new music video with the car. And it's really cool. And I'm watching this and I'm going, oh, man, why can't he make some more movies?
Yeah. I have to look that up, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, he's so good. But, he's also up there in age 2. And he even says he doesn't get the pleasure of making movies as much anymore as he does his music. So he's an artist, power to him. I'll still enjoy the old stuff.
Absolutely.
Well, let's get into the topic for tonight. And
I was wondering when we were going to finish talking about films.
Oh, it was Halloween. We're talking about some good ghost stuff. Well, we're going to talk about something that's actually very personal and close to home to us, and mostly to Irene. I've been involved in it some, but Andy, we'd really like to get Andy's take on it because he is so involved in the occult and might have some good insight into this object that we are researching. We've been researching for a couple of years now, and it seems to be, oh God, Irene, how would you explain this? It seems to be calling to us and making us want to do something with it.
Well, after 46 years of sitting in the attic, well, can't blame it, can you?
So,
been locked away for 46 years.
Well, let's build up from the beginning, okay?
Right.
The object that we're talking about is a ring. And it's certainly not any ordinary ring. In fact, we constantly joke around. It's like the one ring, one ring to rule them all. And but you know what? There's a lot of similarities to this damn thing. So let's start off by, Irene, why don't you tell us, the story. Now, you wrote this story in your first book, Among the Spirits, about how you came in possession of the ring. Could you tell us a little about that?
I did do a chapter in that book about it. It was back in 1971, and I was going out with an Italian boy. Now, I'm going to call him Marco, because that's what I called him in the book. It's not his true name, but we call him, for the sake of this, we call him Marco. And I'd been going out with him for some time. And then one day we were having a conversation. I can't remember how it even came around, to tell you the truth. And he told me that he'd got something, or he had something, that brought him so much bad luck. And to the point where he became ill and the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. Anyway, everything he'd done... he'd brought this object over from Italy when he came over because in them days they were conscripted into the army in Italy. Mm-hmm. And many young lads, to get out of doing that, used to head for Britain and, work in the restaurants and things. And he was just one of them. Anyway, he started to tell me this story, and he mentioned all the bad luck that he'd had with it and one thing or another, and he said, it's all stopped now. I said, well, why is it stopped? He said, because I've buried it. I said, well, so where did you bury it? He said, I buried it in the churchyard. Mm. So I said, well, what is it? He said, it's a ring. He said, a demon ring. So I said, well, how did you get hold of this demon ring? Because I thought, while he was talking, I thought, yeah, you're away with the fairies, mate. Anyway, so he said, it belonged to a recluse that lived in my village. And when the recluse always wore this ring, this hermit, he always wore this ring. And when the hermit died, his family moved into the house that the hermit had lived in.
Marco's family moved in.
Yeah, his family.
Okay.
Yeah, Marco's. And when they moved in there wasn't a stick of furniture or anything. There was nothing there. It had been cleared out. But hanging on a old iron nail in the kitchen was this ring that this hermit always wore. So he took it. I said, well, why did you take it? He said, well, I didn't want anyone else in my family getting it. And I thought, yeah, you are away with the fairies. Anyway, he says he took it and he brought it to the United Kingdom. But his luck did not improve when he came over to the United Kingdom. That's why he took it and he buried it in the churchyard. So I said, okay, we're going to get up. So there we are, spades in hand, in the churchyard. Now, the churchyard, they kept it very, very nice. They mowed all the grass on top of the graves and one thing, and all between the gravestones. It was always trim and always kept nice at this churchyard. And I said, well, where is it? He said, over there. And he pointed. And when I looked, there was a tuft of grass. I'm not kidding you. How a lawnmower could miss this tuft of grass, I don't know. It must have jumped over the top of it, because this one tuft of grass was about a foot high. So, I forgot to tell you, he told me it had been in the churchyard for over a year. Right, so it had gone through all the seasons.
Now, I have to ask this, because something I've always misunderstood about this story, and I'm realizing it for the first time. I thought that when he took you to the ring, it was in Italy, so he actually buried it in a churchyard
in the United Kingdom.
In the UK, okay, interesting.
Yeah, in London. Just on the outskirts of London. Anyway, so it'd been through the snow, the rain, the wind, everything had come down, lashed in those seasons. And this tuft of grass, he said, we walked up to this tuft of grass. I said, where is it? He said, there. And he pointed to the tuft of grass. Now, I thought, yeah, okay. So you now got a tuft of grass. You plonked it on top of this whatever and made out it's growing there. So I went to pull the tuft of grass. I pulled and pulled. That was well rooted in. That grass was well rooted in. Mm. So anyway, we dug there. And the ring was not wrapped in anything. It was just in the soil. And when we picked it up and took it out of the soil, you would have thought it had just been put there. There was no dirt, no mud stuck to it, nothing. But if it hadn't been for that tuft of grass growing on the top of it, which was about a foot high, I would have said, okay, you just put that there.
That's pretty bizarre.
Yeah. So we sneaked back out the churchyard with our spades, one thing or another, and took the ring with us. And so I went to hand it to him. He said, I don't want it. I'm not touching it. He said, I don't want it. He said, you can have it. So I have it. And I've had it for 46 years, and I kept it in the attic of the house I lived in London. And when I moved to this house, I transferred it to the attic of this house.
Now,
a couple of years ago.
No, I was just going to mention you did have it appraised once.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was in the very beginning. Okay, when he gave me the ring, yeah, I took it to a jeweler. Now, this was an old Hungarian jeweler or Yugoslavian or something like that. He'd just come over after the war.
Right.
Okay. He came into the country during the war or after the war, I don't know, but he was a jeweler. To get into his shop, you had to bang on the door because he kept it locked all the time. So he opened the door and I said, can you tell me something about this ring? And he told me to get out of the shop.
Oh.
Yeah. He was panicking, screaming at me to get out of the shop. And of course, I wasn't going to give up, was I? So I said, you tell me about something about this ring, then I'll take it away. So he took a look at it. He said, it's handmade. He said, it's very, very old. He said, it's from silver. And he said, I'm sure he said the eyes were rubies, but the more I look at the eyes, the more I think they're garnets. And he was shaking, literally shaking. And then he turned around and said, "Now get out of my shop."
Oh, Lord.
And we went out the door and he slammed it behind us and he put the bolts on. And he wouldn't let us back in. If I tried to get back in, there was no way I was getting back in that shop. The man was shaking.
Was his reaction before he saw it or the instant he saw it?
As he opened the door, I had it in my hand. And I had my hand open, so it's in the palm of my hand. And I said to him, "Can you tell me, And that's when he's shouting at me to go away.
Yeah, we should point out for our listeners that the ring, we actually have a picture of it on the advertisement for the show tonight. And at the end of the show, we'll give you a link to where you can go and see pictures of the ring. But I can understand his reaction because the ring is not a perfectly circular ring. It is a huge head on it. On the top of the ring is hand carved, and it has the face of, well, what does it have?
This is what we're trying to find out.
It's a very ugly-looking demonic face.
Okay. Right, so it didn't stop there.
Well,
the back of the ring, the shank of the ring was so worn and so thin, I was frightened it was going to snap and the ring would get lost. So that is the only part of the ring that I've had done. I had it reshanked at the back to give it more thickness, so that I wouldn't have any problems with it, because once the shank breaks off, the piece that goes around the back of your finger, all I've got is a head. That's if I don't lose it.
Absolutely.
Now, when you look at him, his eyes do penetrate you. They do stare back at you. He's got one eye that's lower than the other, a bit like Quasimodo. All right? And his jaw shape is slightly different. So you turn the ring sideways, and on one side of one profile of the ring, one side profile of the ring, he's kind of, sorry about that, smiling. Turn it the other way, and he's sneering at you.
That's interesting, because that thought actually had occurred to me looking at it earlier on, that it's a little bit like the Greek masks for the theatre, which you did have half and half happy, half sad. So that, and again, the positioning of the eyes, the one that's lower down, which does look like the sadder side, whereas the other side looks more like an angry or sort of annoyed side, if you like. So
yeah.
Well, even the left side, which the eye is lower, the face is thinner and more gaunt, and when you're looking at it from the right side, it's fuller. So it's really odd. Plus, it has facial hair. I mean, you could tell that the ring was handmade. I mean, it's nothing machine made about this ring, but.
No, there's no joins in it or anything. It's completely from one piece of silver. But one nugget of silver.
The carving
it weighs an ounce.
But here's what's really intriguing about the ring, and has really set us off on our quest to look up the history of it, is it's got horns. It's got what looks like almost curled ram horns at the top.
Definitely. That's one of the things that really caught my eye from what we were saying before about possible origins of it. The ring horns like that you tend to see on things like the god Pan, the Greek very old god as well, that rather than the sort of the big sticky out pointy horns you get on a demon. But as you say, it's completely handmade. So one way it's hard to define who it might be based upon, because it's been completely handmade by somebody. So it's that part is very intriguing, certainly.
But then again, if the horns were sticking out, they'd either catch on your clothes all the time, or they'd do somebody a bit of damage, wouldn't they?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So they've been
to see them the shorter sort of curled horns on Pan. Yeah, it's quite a common sight.
Well, but that's what we hoped. We really hoped it was Pan, or I did, because the part of Italy, it comes from the south of Italy. We discovered that they had unearthed the statue of Pan in Pompeii. And there is a lot of walks and references to Pan and fountains in the villages along that coastline. So we really did hope it was Pan. So we sent photographs to the British Museum, asking if it was Pan. Told them that people had told me that it's a demon, and they came back that they were convinced it was not Pan. No. And my first question about it being a demon, they were more convinced that it would be.
Oh, okay.
But he doesn't stop there.
No, okay. we've got a lot more on this. Well, where do you want to go here? Because we should talk a little bit before we get into more of the history. Let's talk a little bit about what the ring...
paranormal side.
Yeah, what it does.
Yes.
What does it do? Right, you put it on your finger, which is too big for the finger that I wear it on anyway, but I always use that finger because it tightens up on your finger. And so although it's loose when you first put it on, within seconds it's kind of closed up on your finger. And it becomes difficult to take it off.
And see, that's where the comparison to Tolkien's One Ring in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, because that ring would do the same thing. It would get bigger or smaller.
You must have read my book.
Yeah, blame it on Tolkien. Tolkien, you ripped us off.
Hey. Well, of course, he took the idea from the Ring of the Nibelungs, the Ring of Wagner's ring cycle, which, of course, is Germanic mythology, which, again, same thing, changes size depending who's got the ring. So everybody can wear it. So
it doesn't stop there. I'm me being a wicked person. When I was trying to photograph it once, no matter how much you try to photograph this ring, you cannot focus on it properly because the reflection from the camera I don't know, it's very difficult to photograph. So I made a friend of mine put it on. She was terrified of it.
That's cruel of you.
I know. I enjoyed doing it. Sorry, Karen. Sorry, Karen Allen. But, these things had to be done. She turned around and said, it's vibrating on my hand, Irene. She said, I can feel it vibrating. And she was serious. She was serious. She couldn't wait to get the ring off. Okay. Another thing that it does, it changes my personality sometimes, not always, but if I put the ring on, I become aggressive. I've attacked Mark over the internet before now.
She's ripped me a new one a couple times. Yeah, you've ripped me a new one a couple of times.
Yeah, only because I've been messing around and putting the ring on, so it kind of changes your whole personality. You just don't care. You become aggressive. You want to destroy.
Oh dear.
And it doesn't matter who it is. You just want to destroy. Anyway, and another thing it does, and it's done it 3 times yesterday, it jumped. Mark, you can explain that.
Well, you physically moved.
Well, she had it in her safe. And it sits firmly in the safe. And when she went to open the safe...
She's full up with a lot of jewelry, I can tell you.
She opens the door, and this damn thing flies out of the safe, bounces off to the side. Not straight out, but to the side, and bounces off. And then as she was holding it last night, it jumped out of her hand, too.
Twice it jumped out of my hand. But when it came out the safe, you'd think it'd come straight out the door.
Yeah.
Well, it sort of does, but then it turned sideways and it came down and hit the cabinet underneath because the safe's up on a wall, hit the cabinet below the safe and then bounced down. But where it landed, if I looked from the floor where it was laying on the floor to the safe, it's the side of the safe I'm looking at.
Good grief.
Not the front of the safe.
Yeah.
Now,
he's got a habit of doing things like that, isn't he? We call him Reggie Ring.
Yeah, you call him Reggie. But here's the other thing that you forgot to mention is the fact that in all the years that I've known you, we would be talking, and then you would just start telling me the ring is calling to you. It keeps psychically calling to you, wanting you to put it on.
Oh, you get a very, very strong urge to go and get it from wherever it is and put it on.
And it seems to have a personality. It seems to react to certain things. It calls, it wants to be worn. It seems to get upset when you put it somewhere. What happened the other night when you put it away?
Which night was this?
The flies?
Remind me. Oh, God's truth. Now, okay. Now, this is the bit, all right?
Okay.
At one time researching this ring, a couple of years ago, this was before I actually met Mark. Somebody told me it could be the Lord of Flies. It's Beelzebub. Okay? Well, I know Beelzebub and the myth of the flies and one thing or another. But the ring had been out because I've been trying to photograph it. Mm-hmm. And the following morning we got out of bed and the whole of my dining room was full up with hundreds and hundreds of flies.
Oh, lovely.
Okay, it doesn't stop there. We tried to find out where these flies were coming from. There was no window open, nothing. This dining room is off the kitchen. There was no kitchen windows. There was nothing. And they were all concentrated in the dining room, nowhere else in the house. So I said, well, maybe something's crawled under the floorboards and died. So my husband had the floorboards up. No, nothing anywhere. And then these flies just kind of died off or dissipated for no reason. Well,
very strange.
Then the other day, a couple of years later, I'd had the ring out, right, because I'd been talking to Mark about it, and I'd put it away back in the safe. And I'm in the sitting room watching the television, and my husband come in and he said, since you've had that bloody ring out, he said, come and have a look to see what's happening in the office. I came in the office, and I'm not kidding you, there was these flies. Not house flies, but smaller flies. Yeah. Right? Quite about, a couple of centimetres long, about the size of a house fly, but a different shape. All over the ceiling. Great. Literally all over the ceiling. Ooh, I said, have you had any doors open? This was in the evening. This was about 11 o'clock at night. Have you had any doors open out here? Have you had any windows? No, I have not. He said, something landed on my hand. He said, no. I looked at it and there was this fly sitting there and I tried to shake it off and it just sat there. He said, and then when I looked up at the ceiling, he said the ceiling was covered.
Oh, Lord, this is straight out of a horror film, isn't it?
But now, I'm not saying that he's got control over flies, but because of this being planted in my head at some point or other, Beelzebub and the story of the flies, is he letting me know that way? That's the way that who he is, or okay, is it just like he's saying, okay, you're going to recognize me, you know the story of the flies, you will accept the story of the flies, I give you flies. I don't know.
Or it was like it was pissed off at you for putting it away and go, okay, I'll show her flies.
Taking the thing, you lock me away.
Okay, so Pan has been a big thing along this coastline, the Amalfitana coastline in Italy. Okay, Pan is very, very big. There's proof of Pan through statues and things, and there's even a walk that goes through the mountain that's named after Pan. Anyway, but I couldn't find anything about Beelzebub until one day I came across a statue that overlooks the town of Positano. It's up from the hillside. It looks down the hillside over the town of Positano, and it's Beelzebub.
Ooh, do you have a picture of that?
It's somewhere on one of these computers amongst hundreds of other things. I'll try and find it for you. It's a black statue.
Well, the interesting thing, of course, would be that if it is handmade, it could be designed just because that's the kind of idea they had of a generic demon, but there'd be no way of knowing from the image who it was supposed to represent. If you're just sort of hand making it yourself, you might have based it on a picture of, say, for example, Pan or a statue, but Pan isn't the intention of who you're trying to create. But it depends on your level of skill as an artist, whether you can create something that actually represents the image you're trying to go for, or you just make a generic kind of demonic face represent a particular demon. But it's debatable how any of these things are actually supposed to look. I mean, there are illustrations in certain Goetias of how demons are supposed to appear, but they often come down to just one person's interpretation. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's totally accurate if these things exist beyond sort of subconscious anyway. So you could be dealing with just a generic image to represent a particular demon without having any real way of knowing which one it's supposed to be of the many that there are supposed to be.
Yeah.
So that in itself is difficult to tell, but the fact that it's clearly handmade, there's no two ways about that, and it's something that's been crafted probably over quite a period of time if they're not incredibly skilled to get that kind of level of detail, and probably did themselves, not commissioned someone to make it for them. They probably have done it themselves.
Yeah, and I don't believe that it's actually come from Italy. This part of the Italian coast was invaded by the Saracens and the Greeks. So many cultures invaded. There is so much out there to see that are remnants of the old invaders. So then we come across Ammon. Ammon?
Ammon.
There was there was a terracotta bust or a terracotta piece found, a Roman terracotta piece of him, and it looks very much like him. It looks like Reggie, the Ring. So
yeah, there is a Wikipedia page where you can go out and find it if you look for horned deities. And of course, we were doing a lot of historical research on this, trying to get a better idea. It's one thing to say, oh, it's a demon ring, somebody carved it because they wanted something that looked like a demon. Yet we're talking about a part of the world that has so much history going back, especially not only through the Renaissance, all the way back to Roman times and before that. And when we look at the ring and the fact that how much wear that back of the ring had, to where it was so thin it was about to break and you had it fixed, how it tells us this ring is very old. Now comes the trick, is trying to find out how old. And the only way we can do that, you can't test metal for radiocarbon dating. So what else can we do is except do a lot of historical research, compare to pictures and whatnot to see what we can find. And one of the things that we really noticed was that it does appear to look like the statue of Beelzebub above Positano. But even Beelzebub, if you start, and this is where I have a fascination with biblical history or even ancient history, excuse me, these old gods that were benevolent, or certain types of gods in the older cultures, going all the way back to Babylon, to Samaria, to these ancient societies out of Asia Minor. And they have influences over the Roman religion, the Greek and Roman religions that came later, and then eventually the Abrahamic religions. And in Christianity, they took a lot of these old gods and either made them, saints or demons. Take your pick.
Okay. Absolutely.
And so looking at Baal in particular, Baal and Beelzebub, which are technically the same deity, depending on the culture and where they came from. The Baal itself was coming from the old Semitic languages. Now, the title, it was more of like a title meaning Lord. It had associations with the storms. It had a fertility. And if you look back in ancient history, from Sumerian culture influenced the Egyptian cultures. Now, in the Egyptian cultures, you have in Judeo-Christian culture, they talk about with the Hebrews being in Egypt. Okay. They said they were slaves. There's a lot of questioning about that, but there was a big Hebrew influence in the Egyptian culture. Now, the Hebrews weren't worshiping Yahweh or God at that point. That came later with Moses. So who are they worshiping? They're worshiping the old Egyptian gods. And one of them is a variation of Baal, who also is under the Egyptian god Ammon. Amun-Ra, the sun disk, the sun god, but it's also was known to have look like a bull. Okay, they've used depictions of the bull for Ammon. Now, here's where I find interesting. When Moses comes along and they all leave and they go out into the desert, and Moses goes up on the mountain to get the 10 Commandments, and he comes back and finds them worshiping what? The scripture says a calf. Well, it's a bull.
Yes.
It was Ammon, an Egyptian deity, which actually superseded the Egyptians, going back to Baal, to the Babylonian and Sumerian deities.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and Moses, of course, got pissed and crashed the tablets, and because they were worshiping other gods than the one he was trying to convert them over to. But you know what? The culture that they lived in, these are the gods they dealt with. They dealt with these many gods. I always find it fascinating, even in the very first commandment, for the Jewish tradition. The first commandment is, have no other gods before me, for I am a jealous God. Okay? He doesn't say he's the only one. He never, ever said that I'm the only God. That came much later. He just said, no, you don't have anybody else in front of me. I'm your God.
Exactly. That's always been an interesting bone of contention. It is definitely referencing the idea of other gods, but I come first, not a single solo god. Absolutely. Right.
So he wanted to be, that god wanted to be King Cheese. So over Baal. And again, this is, I just find it fascinating when you start looking at a lot of the different names for the so-called demons that is listed in Christianity. So many of these demons just go back to such an earlier time that they were former gods that were worshipped. They weren't evil; they were made evil by the church, who didn't want you to worship them. They wanted you to worship their god.
Totally.
The term Beelzebub was actually the Lord of the Flies. That was actually a kind of a put-down name. It was a derogatory name for Baal, because he basically calling him Lord of Flies. Well, what do flies flock around? Crap. So they were calling him the Lord of Shit. So it was a put-down name, not what the horror movies have. You're filled with flies, although Irene's house is now filled with them. So again, we've been doing a lot of research.
Well, it's not now. They were gone within a few hours.
Well, yeah. And how did they go?
Okay.
Did you find fly carcasses everywhere?
There's no dead flies around here. Where they all gone? He said, I don't know.
Gertie ate them?
Yeah,
Gertie walked around like a Hoover, scooping them up?
Yeah, maybe. Well, sorry for interrupting. Carry on.
No, that's quite all right. In talking with the historians that we've talked to so far, now we're expanding our search to try to find out more, because I'm convinced that the ring itself was not simply just made for somebody like a Satan worshiper or something using it for evil. I think that there's something much more interesting involved with the ring. And from a paranormal standpoint, there seems to be some kind of intelligent energy attached to it. Now, people have heard me talk before. I'm never a fan of quote-unquote haunted objects. But you know what? I do concede that there are times that energies could be attached to inanimate objects, because even inanimate objects have their own energy. Everything is energy. Everything that we think is matter, when you get down to the subatomic level, it's vibrating in energy. So
you sound like me now, Mark.
What's that?
You sound exactly like me. It's exactly what I always say to people. Exactly that about the energy, the fact that fundamentally all is just energy, and the physical matter is just a manifestation of energy. It's the way we see it, but everything is fundamentally energy. So you sound exactly like me.
Well, and from your standpoint in researching on the occult and being more involved with the occult and witchcraft side of it, which a lot of what most people don't understand is even in true witchcraft or Wicca, it is a mastery of a manipulation of energies.
Well, certainly proper occult work, if you like, sort of real magic. That's exactly what it's about. Wicca itself has become a bit more of a religion, but that's a side story. But certainly, if you're a pure ceremonial magician, you're working with sorcery, whatever term you want to call it, when you're working with practical, down-to-earth, hands-on work, then you're manipulating energy fundamentally, absolutely. And the idea that you can imbibe energy into an object and that start to have an effect or become almost like a battery that absorbs and has that energy within it. I've seen that happen many occasions. I mean, I can tell a little story a little while of a particular object that I experienced handling and could really felt the energy off of it. It was really quite potent. So, yeah, there's absolutely... I mean, something like that, it doesn't mean that the person who had it made or was who made it particularly had it for a particular purpose in mind. But if they're practicing magician, they're carrying out ritual activity and they're wearing it all the time, then inevitably that energy is going to go into the ring as well. It's going to build up within it. So you are going to have, even unintentionally, you're going to empower the item. Now, if you're doing it specifically and deliberately, of course, you're even greater energy levels within it, definitely.
God knows how many people have had this ring before me.
Well, absolutely.
And it depends on how old the ring really is. Now, originally, we were thinking the ring might be a couple hundred years old. Yet the more we're starting to look into it, about a week ago, I was thinking it could be almost 600 years old, going back to the early 1400s or earlier. It almost looks like it'd be forged within the Renaissance period because of a lot of the jewelry that you've seen in later years is a lot more refined. This does have a crudeness to it and a specific purpose in the way it was carved. But now, I don't know. This is why we really want to try to find some more historians, people more knowledgeable, not only on the area with the Renaissance and the old gods coming into there, but maybe even someone who's more of an expert on the old Sumerian gods and religion, because I have a sneaky suspicion, especially considering the amount of wear on a ring. I mean, you can wear a ring 100 years and it's not going to wear down like that. And that means it has to be a lot older to be worn down so much and worn a lot. We don't have any idea. And as Irene mentioned earlier, we're now starting to suspect the ring may not even be European.
I think the best thing would be to go and see a specialist silversmith who could give you an idea, probably from things like tool marks and tool working, an idea of age of that ring. I mean, I'm sitting looking on Google at the moment of images of rings from the 1600s, and they do tend to be quite simplistic, apart from ones that are of the highest quality with like jewels inset into them. More kind of single metal rings tend to be fairly basic. But I think a silversmith would be your best bet in terms of understanding the style of the work, the kind of tools being involved. I mean, if it's got to be someone with some skill, because it is still pretty detailed, even it's a bit lopsided, but it's still got a fair bit of detail within it. So I think that would be definitely an avenue to explore, someone who knows nothing about the imagery but everything about silver working itself, to give a clearer idea, I think.
That would definitely be one route to take. I'd also like to take the route of,
good idea,
of looking at taking the image of the ring with comparisons to other types of old deities. I mean, again, around the Renaissance, if the ring is, let's say, early 1400s, the Renaissance is starting off at that point. There's also coming in a little bit later, with the Inquisition and a lot of religious fanaticism, where people may want to hide something like that. But I think back then there was a little bit more of a mixture of religions. Now, Italy today is primarily extremely Catholic. how was it back in? I know the Roman Church really grew in from the 1400s onward to have such a iron fist control over most of Europe. And so, but what about just before that? I'd be interested to hear more about, were there more of a variety of different religions, beliefs, what the ring could have been used for? I mean, the fact that we're feeling from the paranormal side, I don't want to say there's negative energy out of it. It's not that, Irene, is it? It's, you get called to do it, and yeah, your personality has changed, but you've also worn the ring, and you've been perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So maybe...
But it's not always bad. It seems that just when you shove it away for a period of time, it gets a bit peeved about it.
It gets cranky.
I mean, Christianity in Italy was very much taken over by the 600s AD. So it's been a predominantly Christian country for a very, very long time. So if it's come from elsewhere, then of course you can't say an awful lot. But certainly by that point, it was strongly Christian from about 500-600 AD. So.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's say, okay, the possibility of it is still, it could have been carved in the Renaissance. It could have been specifically used as a demon for whatever reason, whether for ill or whatnot. The ring itself, it has this energy, it has this personality. And a lot of that could be how the ring may have been created for one reason, but like you said, if it's used by somebody else for bad, negative intent, that energy could wear off on the ring and have a residual effect.
Well, it could be very much in positive intent and doing sort of positive things, and then perhaps somebody else using it is changing the energy itself in it. I mean, I tend to go along with the theory with magic that all magic is neither good nor bad. It just depends on your intent. So someone could have spent years either unintentionally or intentionally empowering it, and then somebody else doing other things, then, if you like, it almost warps that energy or transforms it and uses it for negative intent. It's hard to say. I'd like to get hold of it, perfectly honest with you. I'd like to hold the damn thing and wear it myself.
Well, I tell you, Andy, there's not one photograph been taken of this ring that's done this ring justice. You've got to see it for yourself.
Yeah, no, I want to. I mean, of the three that you've set up for the Facebook group, the middle one is fairly clear. But again, the other two, as you said before, the other two in the side, they're a little blurred where you're just trying to get the side profile of it. I want to hold it. I mean, it's calling to me. It's absolutely calling to me.
It's a bugger, isn't it?
You need to post it to me now. You get in the
it's
car.
Very heavy. I tell you, it's very heavy, and it's quite uncomfortable. You can feel that weight on your finger.
Yeah.
Well, with the big head on there, it's a little unwieldy. I don't know. I've seen some women with some huge rocks on their hands. I don't know how they handle it. But we've been doing some experiments on it. I don't want to say too much. Let's just say that something you just said earlier a few minutes ago, Andy, about magic being neither good or evil. It depends on intent. Kind of struck a chord with us because that's kind of what we get a little bit from this ring, is the fact that it's not evil, it's not good, it just is.
Yeah. Often things like that can be used simply as your focus point of what you're doing, your work. You have something that you actually focus your mind and intent into, and that can retain the intent. But if you change the intent, the energy is still there. You just change the energy that's within it. And so it's like a battery, basically. Your battery can do all sorts of things. You can plug it in to do something nice, useful, or something horrible. You can put the battery into a torch, illuminate the room, put the battery into an electric carving knife and carve someone's arm off. It's that kind of thing. It's one extreme or the other. It's quite possible. It's the intent you have behind it. But again, I'm just going through imagery, trying to find something that approximates towards it. And there are various Amon, the particular image I've found, which is probably the same Amon image that you came across, is quite similar, down to the sort of the hair around the face, the shortened curled horns, the actual face itself. It bears similarities. My guess would be that whoever made this probably did see a statue or image somewhere and have started upon that to the best of their ability. How good that ability is obviously would depend on the original statue. But to me, that's the idea I get from this. If you all look at something that someone's tried to emulate, and again, it could be Italian base, it could be further east, it could be from Greece. I've got this feeling it's come from Greece. I can't tell you why. It's just an impression I'm getting just looking at it more and more. Not saying necessarily Pan again, because obviously the Greek pantheon, well, obviously the Roman pantheon is based on the Greek pantheon, so they're very similar in many respects anyway. But the imagery or the idea of it, I just get this Greek kind of vibe from it just by looking at the picture. That's what's really coming across to me, both in terms of images I'm looking at and just the general feel from looking at the image of it, if you like.
I'll tell you another thing I've just remembered, right? And I did put this in the book, actually. A weird thing that this old jeweller said to me as he was shouting to me to get out the shop. One of the sentences he shouted was, "You're the keeper of the ring, now get out of my shop." And he had real venom in his voice, but for a 20-year-old girl, what do you mean I'm a keeper of a ring? It's just a frigging ring.
As far as you were concerned.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah.
So you must take the ring and cast it into the fires of Mount Doom.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe we need to go find the elves and have a council and decide what to do with it.
The elven species of Eregion forged 9 rings. I remember. I've read Lord of the Rings too many times.
Oh God, yeah, me too.
I've never read it.
Read it, movies, everything. We did have something interesting happen last night, though, because we were having talks about the ring. And you know what? We were actually this is going to sound kind of silly to some people, but because we feel like
it seems silly to us at the time until it happened.
It seems like there could be an intelligent entity or energy attached to this ring, because it seems to have this personality that calls to Irene. It seems to throw temper tantrums, jumps out, flies, that kind of thing. It seems to have a personality. So we had it out last night, and we were doing a Skype call, and Irene turned on her video for once, which is rare, never happens. But we were looking at this ring, and we kind of did almost like an impromptu EVP session, trying to talk to it to see if we could get some kind of a response. And there were a couple of times last night that we had a couple things happen that we really can't explain. Now, we also have to preface this. Irene does live in a haunted house. She has her own fair share of ghosts in her house. But yet, what happened last night is we were asking it to kind of give us a sign of its presence, if it could make a light. And at one point, within a minute, twice, while I was watching her on Skype, this white mist flew right past her head. Just went whoosh, curved past. And then a minute later, it did it again on the other side.
Very interesting.
And it was right after we had asked it to try to give us a sign of itself, that it was hearing us and understanding us. There was also a part where we were asking questions out loud, and we got some kind of strange noise in the background that you can watch. We
and it wasn't Gertie.
I was going to say, was it Gertie?
Yeah, there was no inevitable smell following it when it was Gertie. But we did hear this sound, and the fact that both of us were on video, and you can see neither of our mouths moved. We weren't moving. We weren't doing anything, and there was this weird, almost like a kind of noise that came out of nowhere, and happened a couple of times while we were asking questions. So, really, I don't know. It's she's had the ring for so many years, and it's only now that we're suddenly fascinated with it.
Well, it's the time, obviously, to start really investigating further. I've been the entire time we've been talking, I have been looking through not just obviously Google searches of various terminologies, but I've got quite a lot of sort of older occult books on PDF on my laptop here, and there's no image that's directly like it. There are approximations, and I think it comes back, and I still think the same, that this is not, you're not going to find a specific image that is very, very the same unless you find something it's been based upon. I think it might be someone's idea of a generic. Now, I'm going to say demon, but not the demon in the sense of the minions from hell. If you're talking about Greek, the concept of demon or daemon is quite a different thing there. It's much more of an intelligence. Again,
Yes.
well, as you're saying, the idea of intelligence within the ring, that you're talking about an intelligent spirit. Now, I don't like the word spirit because it's not the same as ghost spirit, but an intelligent being, if you like, that demons were, that they're there to help or hinder depending on what mood they might be in, or depending on how you treat them. And certainly in some of the old Greco-Roman magic, the idea of trying to create that kind of connection to a daemon and having a symbol of that daemon as your connection point is not unheard of. So it's quite possible that the person's idea was to try and create this link with a supernatural force that was would be helpful or beneficial to them, or they could help or make use of that particular demon's or daemon's energy, power, if you like. Now, they're not limited to a particular number or type. The idea of the ordering hierarchy of demons is a medieval thing that I've talked about. I think we've done a show on previously, but it certainly comes in the medieval times. Prior to that, the idea of a daemon was much more amorphous. It wasn't so clearly identified as being this particular name or this particular activity. And as you were saying earlier, Mark, a lot of those medieval demons are the demonization, literal demonization of old sort of native spirits and native gods, and sort of even household spirits being turned into demonic forces to suit Judeo-Christianity. But my feeling is that this is what we're looking at, is something that possibly has come from Greece rather than Italy, and that it is the representation of a particular statue or some kind of entity like that they have created in order to use it as a focal point to build up energy to connect with a daemon spirit, to work with them or for them. So
that actually makes a lot of sense.
Hang on a minute. There is no demon spirit in this ring, is there, Andy?
Not demon, no, daemon. This is the difference.
Daemon. There's no daemon in this ring, is there?
It's quite a different thing. Quite possibly.
Sugar plum fairies. You got to be joking on me.
Well, Irene, what he's talking about is exactly what we were talking about last night. It's not an evil entity. It is an entity itself. Yeah. They call it a daemon. And again, language changes over the centuries. It doesn't mean the same as demon now. The daemon.
But he can be a demon if he's a daemon. He can be a demon when he wants to be. Yeah.
Well, kind of like you.
It depends what you're looking for. Let me just read this to you quickly. This gives you an idea, Irene. A daemon is a benevolent or benign nature spirit. Beings of the same nature, both mortal and as deities, similar to ghosts, chthonic heroes, or spirit guides, or forces of nature. The entities themselves. According to Hesiod's myth, the great power figures were honoured after death as a daemon. So it's almost like the honouring of a spirit who's passed away. So it's a type of quasi-divine being, according to a writer with a long name, but rather a non-personified particular mode of their activity. So it's almost like the spirit of a river, the spirit of the tree, if you like. It's that kind of thing. It's not a fully formed living entity. It's like an energy of something. So that could be their intention, is trying to build up. Say, for example, if you're very much into sort of nature and your nature spirits, and you like the trees, and you like sort of the life force of a tree, life force of forests, a daemon is a representation of that life force, if you like, that energy. It's something that you can create for yourself, an image of it, in the likeness of this is my connection with that spiritual energy. So it's like giving it a face, if you like, giving it a form that you can connect with. And if you're particularly into that kind of area, then you would want something that represents that. So you have the face on that ring becomes a representation of that daemon connection you're making with that particular energy. If that makes sense.
So that's the nice side of daemon. What's the other side?
Well,
the other side, you could do the same thing, but on an evil way.
Yeah, it's like humans. We can be good people or we can be bad people. We can be nice or we can be assholes. It's nothing's inherent in our nature that we're going to be one way or the other. It depends on the circumstances and the situation. Just trying to make you feel better.
Could it? Yeah. All right. Going back to Ammon.
Mm-hmm.
Ammon spread into Greece. Alexander the Great.
Yes, Alexander the Great even had some images of himself carven in I think in coins or whatnot with the horns of Ammon to represent himself.
Oh, yes.
It might be him.
It could be. It could be. Wouldn't be. It's not that uncommon for those sort of great leaders to later on become deified in that way that what we do now in modern times with good people becoming saints in Christianity. It's a similar kind of thing. That very strict division of angels and demons, the idea of God, all that kind of stuff is all relatively modern. It was much more amorphous, much more kind of depending on who you are and where you were, as to how those kind of things absolutely work. So there are very different ways of looking at these things.
Okay, so if you had to give it an age, Andy, what would you say?
It would be guesswork, and I'd have to be honest, just looking at generally images of rings from 1600s, that to me looks much newer than that. I wouldn't put it much older than 1700s because of the styling, the way it's done. If you look at rings from anything sort of further back, face-based rings tend to be a lot flatter. They don't tend to be as raised or as well carved as that. Almost like images like you get in coins, much flatter, much more sort of rounded and smooth. That to me does look more modern, but I'm no expert on those sort of things. I do get what Mark's saying, and I do think it's quite possible it's based on something much older, a statue of some kind or a carving, and someone's attempted to recreate it. But the very much the lopsidedness of the face says that they have some skill, but it wouldn't have been a professional. But I would say probably no more than sort of 17, maybe 1800s at the oldest. But I do think it's trying to represent something much older. It's just, again, partly based on the style of the way the rings put together. You try and look up rings of that kind of time frame. They tend to be, as I say, images tend to be flatter rather than sort of very well raised and mounted. But silversmith, that's the person to go and see, a professional silversmith who actually works with silver and has obviously studied
it was shown to a woman years ago who said it was from the Renaissance.
Which is a bit further back, sort of 1600s. So yeah, we're still in that time frame. But I'd certainly go and find somebody who's an expert in silver work, who really does know his stuff. Funny enough, quite a few years back when I used to work in London, there was the assays office for London.
There's no markings in this.
Yeah, but they can tell by the silver itself, the terms of the grade and quality and the way it's carved. As I say, they can look for tool markings, they can look at style and shaping to give you usually a fairly accurate idea of the age and even the origins of the ring. So that would be my first step, certainly.
Well, I've never seen, I've seen head rings before, but never anything like this.
Well, I have seen, but they're pretty modern, to be honest with you. I've seen stuff quite common, actually, particularly in the heavy metal world, I have to say. I've seen a few rings similar to this kind of thing, but they would be very much made sort of much more modern.
Plus, again, what intrigues me about the carving of this ring is the differences on both sides. It's subtle but noticeable. It's almost like the Mona Lisa. When you cover up half the Mona Lisa's face, she's either smiling or frowning. And, looking at the ring from the right side, more fuller, it's smiling a bit. But when you go to the other side, there's less metal. They carved up and chiseled the jawline out some to make the face look longer, really long hooked nose. There's a lot of similarities to some Pan.
Protruding chin.
Yeah.
Protruding chin.
And as we mentioned,
and the lips.
As we mentioned with Pan, there are some statues of Pan that look very close to that, but again, nothing so asymmetrical. Usually everything is perfect on one side or the other. So this does seem to be done intently, with purpose, especially that eye lowered down as far as it is. Almost like the whole face is gaunt and drooping.
And it's the way the eyes are set in there as well. They're kind of pushed into the soft metal when it was hot, maybe, and then pulled up, the silver pulled up to all the way around the eye to hold it in, which is, it is an old setting, very old setting.
Very intriguing object. So you can kind of see, and of course, now that we're coming up on Halloween and with the little paranormal things going on about it, which is why we're really intrigued with it at this point in time. And the ring itself, we're realizing, even with the British Museum confirming that the ring is fairly old, even though they couldn't throw out some approximate dates, it's at least a couple hundred years old, possibly older, which makes it, a valuable object. I mean, for research, for history. So we've started our own Facebook page on it, and we're going to be posting updates for anybody who's interested in it as we find out more on the history, or even on the paranormal side, anything else that we learn on the ring as we go through the journey with it. So you could find it on Facebook. We the title of our page is Demon Ring of Amalfitana. So you can look it up.
And if anybody can shed light on it, we would be very grateful.
We are looking to put together an entire history of the ring. We want to try to find out as much as possible about it. We may even put it together in a book form or something at one point. So anybody who, of course, helps us, we will definitely mention you in that process, because we do share with people who share with us. So
I'm also I'm going to take it to Naples Museum.
That's a good idea.
I think that's, considering that's the area it was found in, I think that definitely have some local historians. I totally agree with Andy that you should find a silversmith to see if they can get an age on the metal and where they think how old it could be. But definitely the carving, the artistry work, definitely you should go to the museum and talk with the historians there and see what they have to say.
Another thing about it, whoever put the stones into the eyes, they put red stones, not black, not blue, nothing. They're red, bright red.
Which, of course, we thought were rubies, but as you mentioned, they could be garnets.
Well, certainly as a coloured stone, red is probably the most common colour that is used for eyes in rings. I mean, I've got a couple of examples I've just found here online again. But I used to have a ring many years ago that wasn't a million miles away from that. I mean, I actually lost it at a concert years ago, but that had it was just a bit of cut glass, I think, literally glass, not sort of valuable, that was set as eyes into it. It was quite more demonic, I have to say. But that was a good long few years ago, and I've lost it long ago. But so it tends to be red as the eye colour that's given for these things. But there's still a mystery. It's still intriguing. It's one of those things you do find yourself sort of staring at and thinking, what's going on there?
Well, definitely, and that's why we're so interested in it right now as well, and to try to find out the history. I mean, being a history nut as well as a paranormal nut, if you got something that's more than 100 or something years old, I'm right on that like white on rice. So definitely we're going to be looking more into that.
Absolutely. It is very intriguing. Again, one question I would like to ask Irene is how, I mean, okay, it's a long time ago, but how sure are you of the story that the chap told you of its origins? It wasn't just sort of trying to spin you a yarn to sort of get in your
who knows? I can only say that I can only believe the story he told me, because I didn't believe it in the beginning, but...
but later experiences rather confirm things, I suppose.
Yeah, you can only believe what you're told, can't you?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
It might be that he was... I don't know.
Well, it's an elaborate story to come up with. Is just a story, certainly.
The fact that I went along there to dig it up proved something to me, and it also proved to me that there is no way that this ring could have just been put in the earth. Not with that big tuft of grass that was growing on the top. Yeah. And it was well-rooted grass.
Absolutely.
You know?
How long did you say it'd been there before? I missed that little bit.
About a year?
Oh, about a year. Just so I think he'd put it in there just over a year previous.
Right.
Yeah.
To just get away from him.
Now, well, here's the other thing that he mentioned, and we'll kind of bring it back on you a bit here, is he says that he found it hanging on a nail.
Yeah.
But then he said...
An old nail.
He said that it was been bringing him bad luck. Did he elaborate on what bad luck, and how did he know it was the ring that was causing it?
Illness. He said, he was a Catholic, so he was very superstitious anyway. Illness, everything he put down to bad luck, he put down to the ring. Even the failing of his driving test about 5 times. So, yeah. But he was adamant on the illness that the ring was causing him. It was draining him. And this is what it done last night, wasn't it, Mark?
Yeah, it...
Which was rather strange.
I can attest to that. It kind of wiped me out at the end of our session last night. I was very drained of energy. And it's not like we were doing anything magical or anything like that. We were just looking at the ring. We were discussing it. And, like in an EVP session, we were asking direct questions and just trying to see if we could elicit some kind of response. And you started to get a headache. I started to get my eyes were burning. And then right towards the end of the session, it was all I could do to blow you off. Say, I'm going to bed. I was so wiped out because of it. So there's definitely some kind of energy, very strong energy attached to it.
Well, this certainly sounds like the sort of thing we should bring to John Carpenter if he needs a new film. Fit in with his style of work, wouldn't it? Definitely. It's absolutely fascinating. I mean, I have experienced objects like that really do have a powerful vibe to them. I mean, I've told the story before, I know, but I will just briefly tell it again, as it's kind of in context of what we're talking about here. When I first met Andy Collins, and back in the days when he first wrote the book The Black Alchemist, about sort of rather nefarious activity that was occurring in the southeast of the UK. And part of that experience was finding objects had been very specifically affected, charged with energy, however you want to put it, and then left at specific sites around the southeast in order to create a connection, a kind of grid connecting these sites together. And he and Bernard he'd worked with had acquired a few of the objects. They'd found them where they'd been left in situ in things like churchyards. And at the end of the talk, he gave us the opportunity just to hold some of the items. And I held one of these pieces of slate that had imagery carved into it, which I now know as being from John Dee. But at the time, I didn't know a lot about it. Excuse me. And you could feel it. I mean, it was almost vibrating in my hand. You could really feel the energy in this piece of slate. And clearly the guy, the chap we called him, or they called the Black Alchemist, I didn't know his actual name, but he'd used it and charged it up and empowered it for a very specific purpose of creating a connection with the location you left it in. But you could really feel the energy from it. So that was one of the first experiences directly of holding something like that wasn't my own work, if you like, but somebody else. And you could really feel it. So I was convinced from that moment onwards that you can definitely empower objects. You can put your energy into the object, and you keep doing it for long enough, vociferously enough, if you like, then you build up to something that you can feel and others can actually experience. So no, definitely can work.
Well, that's how these mediums and people can do psychometry work.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But whereas with most of psychometrized objects, they're just something that persons actually had, say, a grandmother's had a ring or something like that for many years, not done anything with it, but they've just worn it and connected to it that way. When you're talking about people deliberately and specifically putting energies into an object, empowering it, perhaps it's been done with that ring, then of course it's going to be full of energy.
There's also, there's modern day takes on it too, like they made these popular movies now about the Annabelle doll, which, the doll, okay, but look at the doll from the movie and you tell me what parent is going to buy that for their kid. Okay. It's made to look evil. It's like, and what they failed to tell you is how the supposed real, I say supposed because I have some questions about it. The supposed real Annabelle doll is just a big Raggedy Ann doll. Looks as harmless as anything. And yet it's inspired stories, it's inspired these movies. And I know even the Ghost Adventures crew are doing an episode on it this weekend. They're having a 2-hour special talking about this demonic haunted doll. And that's also a favorite of in the paranormal stories and with investigators, dolls being haunted. Look at that island south of Mexico City, the island of the dolls down there. That place, that's on my bucket list. I want to go there to investigate that.
It's very strange looking.
And how much they claim there's so much paranormal activity there because of these dolls, but yet how much of it is what people are bringing in with them? Because people already they're already creeped out by dolls. Are they putting their own thoughts and fears or whatever and creating the energy that suddenly makes these things start to act like they have a life of their own?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that if you place your intent either deliberately or unintentionally, then you will start to have an effect. And I mean, you could argue these haunted objects, someone starts off saying they're haunted, you believe they're haunted, you put your belief into that object, and eventually it becomes haunted because you put your energy into it. I mean, there's a friend of mine, I think we've had him on the show previously, John Blackburn, who's worked with the painting called The Anguished Man.
Yes.
It's very strange. I mean, I've worked with that directly myself. I've got a very strange photograph of a weird light anomaly, and it's not like an orb or anything like that. It's something very strange that I took quite close to it. And on another investigation, I watched the thermometer that was aimed at the picture. It went down 17 degrees in less than 5 minutes. It just kept going down and down and down to well below the room temperature. That was very strange. So, objects can definitely have energy put into them. Whether you'd say that were haunted, that's a different matter. And I think this is one of the possible confusions that arises. I don't think these objects are haunted per se. There's not a spirit entity, whatever you want to call it, attached to the object. There's energy in the object, and that itself responds and resonates to you. And that's quite a different thing to being haunted.
There's a lot of other stories with people who think they've had haunted objects or they've had objects with energy. And I struggled with this for years because I'm sitting there going, okay, you bought a rocking chair from an antique store, you bring it home, now suddenly your house is haunted. Yes, there's a ghost attached to that rocking chair, is what they try to tell you. And I look at that like, why in the hell would a ghost spend eternity focused on a frickin' rocking chair? Or
yes, exactly.
or a child's toy or anything like that. And I think we start getting into the territory of, well, we're just trying to find explanations to put on things where we don't really have a rational explanation. So we're just putting something else to it in the meantime, not knowing what the hell we're talking about. and I think that's what's happening with a lot of these haunted locations. Sorry, somebody's doing some work in my house here, and they're banging. I'll mute when I'm not talking. You could look at that as why properties are haunted, or a location like, say, a Gettysburg, which, Civil War battles fought there, and now it has all this energy attached to it. Do you think, from what you have been researching, that, objects and places and locations, things like that, can absorb energy and affect the environment?
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those questions of if it's a long-term or short-term effect. I often give a particular example of my own experiences investigating a place called the Galleries of Justice in Nottingham, the UK. I've been there many times and done lots of investigations there. And there was one, it's very haunted. I mean, it's an old prison, so it's got a lot of atmosphere to it anyway. But there's one particular area which is called the women's bathroom, which is a women's bathroom from the prison, that has been particularly active over the years. But on this one investigation on a Saturday night, we were there, and the atmosphere was very different. It was very dark, it was very heavy, not like it usually feels like at all. It was quite a different atmosphere, and there was just this feeling something's happened here. And when I spoke to the on-site security guy that's using like a little hut nearby, by the main entrance, should say, some way off from where we were, he said yes, there was a group in last night, but there wasn't many of them, and I'm not quite sure what they were up to, but I did smell like candle burning, or there was like candle wax left in the bathroom area. So it suggested they'd done something in that area which he wasn't too impressed with. He only saw it after he did his rounds after they'd gone, so he wasn't aware of it at the time. But it's something like I can't remember exactly what it was. It was like a smell of burning, or there was wax left behind, or candles, something like that. So it was clearly something had gone on that night, on the Friday night, the night before. I was there again afterwards, and it was back to normal. But that one night, there was no doubt about it. Something had gone on. It had definitely left a short-term impression on the location. But going further back to the days of working with the EarthQuest group and going to a few locations where stuff had definitely happened, again, there was definitely a feeling there. You could sense there was something different, something not quite right. Now, as I say, how long after the event the energies remain is a matter of debate. I mean, I think entropy gets involved and it dissipates after a period of time, if not being re-empowered, if you like. But yeah, certainly the effect on locations by what people might be doing at those locations is inescapable. It definitely happens, certainly.
I had that happen to me when I investigated the Napoleonic Bastille. What's that for? It's in Dover. I can't say the word.
I think I know what you mean. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah.
Napoleon never mind. In Dover. Yeah. Someone had been messing around in there, and I tell
that
you what,
Napoleonic
left some weird energy.
There's no doubt about it.
I wrote about it in my book, Among the Spirits.
Many more reasons for people to buy Among the Spirits.
There.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
there's quite a few things in there.
Well, it's like a house too, and Irene will mention this, the fact that you live in a house that is haunted. You've got at least 3 ghosts there that you know of.
Yeah.
So why?
And this house was built on love, and I think that's what's kept them here. You don't
think it was maybe possibly other energy to the land that might doing it? Because you do think you were on some ley lines there.
Well, yeah, it's been all kind of tested out by various people saying that there are ley lines. They even drew me a map of where they ran and everything. But no, I think what's held this house together, Herbert built this house out of love. This house, in fact, one of my ghosts, when she was alive, Myra, said this house is built out of love. And it needs a family that can love it.
Well, that's you.
And I think that's the biggest draw of this house, because I don't get any problems. I really don't get any problems.
Well, let's go back, though, to the ring for a moment. Okay?
Yes.
Marco had mentioned that it brought him a lot of bad luck.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now, you and I have had many talks over the last couple of years where it seems like you and your family have been plagued with a lot of bad luck.
Mm-hmm. Just recently, yes, since we've been messing around with the ring again.
Well, that's going to be my question to you. Do you honestly feel that this inanimate object has energy that can cause misfortune? Or cause things to go bad for you?
I do feel I think it can. I really do.
Do you think it could do it of its own?
With him, after getting rid of the ring on me, he went off, he emigrated abroad, he became a millionaire.
Okay. So.
He never got married, though.
Well, here's the other thing with that then, is like, okay, so why do you hang on to the ring? If it's as old as
people have said to me before, but what do I do with the ring? I throw it away. Someone else will pick it up. Whatever happens,
I'll have it.
If the ring is as old as we think it is, you could probably get a pretty penny for it.
I don't want to sell this ring. I wouldn't sell this ring for money.
So again, what is the appeal to that?
Not now. I wouldn't have done. There was a time when I thought maybe I needed some money, and I did think, well, get rid of the ring. But no, I don't need money now. So no, I wouldn't sell this ring. In fact, I've got quite attached to it. It's in a weird sort of way. I've got quite attached to it. I don't want it going anywhere. And like I said, people have said, throw it in the sea. I'll throw it in the sea and then go down the fish and chip shop and I'll buy a fish and then I'll pop the ring.
That would be scary.
Or my
that would
boat.
be really scary.
Yeah.
If you did that.
Or I'll chuck it in the sea and my boat will sink.
Okay, but then I'm going to throw that out there too. You know, you have talked about when you die what you'll do with the ring, and gee,
yes, you're getting it.
Yeah, see what she's going to do to me, Andy. Yeah, I think I have enough bad luck as it is right now, and she's going to send me that bloody ring.
Yeah.
Listen. Weird as it may sound, 46 years this blasted ring sat in a cold old attic, right? 2 cold old attics actually, and I never bothered with it. But since I've been bothering with it, I have a deep attraction to it. I feel protective of it.
I don't know if you remember.
I don't want to let it go anymore.
I don't know if you remember, Ari, but it was the first thing we really talked about, actually.
Yeah,
First
I told you about it, yeah.
Ring, yeah, when we were, the old Skype camera was actually working, you showed me the ring. I thought, blimey, yeah, that is unusual. As I say, it still intrigues me, certainly. I do, the more I think about it, the more I look at this, the more I kind of know there's other images, I do feel it's Greek. I just really does. The whole idea of the Greek and the daemon thing just seems to really resonate with me, that could be the connection you've got, which again comes back to what I said before, that the image itself might be hard to identify because it's more of an amorphous in itself. It's just a generic image, if you like, that fits in with whatever this guy was interested in working on. But to me, it's not just been made to be a decorative item. It's made with intent. There's no doubt about that at all. It's made with very definite intent.
The strange thing about it, I'm sitting here with the ring in between my fingers and I'm stroking it. You know, I'm stroking it like I stroke a dog. I am getting attached to it. This is why I've got to put it away again.
Yes.
And you know,
it's like I can't explain it. It's as if it's mine. You're mine. You belong to me.
It's your
I'm
precious.
never going to hurt you. I want to keep you. I love you. This type of thing, you know?
My precious.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, my precious. And you know, they had that in the movies too, you know, with Frodo stroking the ring, like petting it, you know, it's like lovingly.
It could be because it's very, you know, I don't know. It's just kind of nice to touch.
Well, you know,
to first pick it up, it's icy cold. Icy cold.
So, well,
Then,
could you not like use it to, you know, get superpowers? You know, become a superhero or something, or hey, even an arch villain.
Yeah, you're taking the pee out of me, aren't you?
Well, you know, actually, not really.
Yeah, I am wondering whether I could throw something in a certain direction, some sort of. Well, no, I couldn't do that. Couldn't do that to anyone.
You could ask the resident of the ring to do some help you out. You know, particularly if it is a daemon spirit, then they are able to be helpful if you ask them nicely.
Do you know, I've never done that.
Well,
I've never done that. I've never said to him, okay, yeah, I've got this problem. Can you sort it for me?
Well, here's the thing to be careful of in that. Okay, if you're
Karma.
well, it's not karma. Well, if you're talking about that, then yeah. But if it's like with the tales of the Arabian Nights, you remember the Aladdin, okay, or you know, genies that come from the Middle Eastern cultures, okay, they would grant wishes, yet there was always a catch. That's where
that's the problem.
That's where the
I don't think he'd grant me any wishes, but I am getting a very, very protective feeling towards it. The more we talk tonight, I'm getting more protective of it. The more I've been handling it these last few days, I've become more protective of it, you know. But I just can't understand why it keeps jumping out of everywhere. It's like it's got a suicide.
It's getting your attention. It's letting you know its power, and I think it's
closed in.
Yeah. It probably is getting.
I tell you what, when it jumped out of that blasted safe, I hadn't even put my fingers on it, had I, Mark?
No.
I'd opened the safe door and bang, it was out.
I heard you cuss and I heard it hit the floor.
Yes, I did use a few choice language. Yeah. But it's. I think I would now. It's changing my whole. Even as we talk, it's changing my whole attitude. Or something's changing my whole attitude. I feel very, very protective of it. I think if anybody turned around and insulted it right now, I'd fly at them.
Andy, we better be careful. She'll turn us into a newt.
Yeah, I have Newton toad and all that sort of stuff. Absolutely.
Mate.
They're saying it after us. No.
Well, we actually...
It's just strange effect it has on you.
We actually have run out...
I will, when I meet you, I will bring the ring.
Yes, definitely. I want to see it.
Yeah.
Well, we've run out of time. That's the end of the show for this week.
Oh, quick one.
Yes.
A few weeks' time, we're doing a show on Welsh folklore, goblins, and other things that go bump in the night in Wales.
We'll be looking forward to that one.
Yeah, it's going to be good. That is going to be good. It's all about goblins, elves, and witches that reside in legends from Wales.
The Trey Mole.
In the United Kingdom. Yeah.
The Trey Mole in that. Well, Irene and Andy, thank you very much. This has been a fun talk tonight, and we are out of time. So just to remind everybody, next week we'll be doing our big paranormal roundtable at the Cock and Balls. So be sure to tune in.
Yes, there'll be more spirits flying around there than anyone can think of. I tell you, mine's a gin and tonic.
Yep. The most ball you ever hear in one night.
All right, well, thanks a lot, guys, and thank you, everybody, for listening. We will catch you all next week. Have a great evening, and we'll catch you soon.
Okay, bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.